Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Over the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kev Maguire. And they will then stay with me after 11. So, welcome to you. What a day. Let's check out the front pages.
Amazing.
Yeah, first of all, shall we? The Eye quoting perhaps the most arresting line of Dominic Cummings' testimony to the House of Commons committees today over the government's handling of the pandemic. Tens of thousands of people died who didn't need to die. That quote also makes the front page of The Guardian. The Metro reacts to his appearance with the headline, Domshell. It is the same headline for the Daily Mail, but with rather more details, including his assertion that the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, should have been fired 15 to 20 times in the early days of the outbreak. The Times declares Cummings rains fire on number 10. The Financial Times focuses on Mr. Cummings' allegation that Mr. Johnson was unfit to lead the country during a pandemic. Well, the Telegraph shows him talking in animated fashion during his appearance. Cummings takes revenge, they say. So plenty to discuss, as you can imagine. Andrew Pearce, Kev Maguire are here. We will come on to the credibility or otherwise of this witness. But first of all, the accusation, Andrew. Lions led by donkeys, including the man at the top who is quite simply unfit for office. What did you make of it?
Well, this was probably the most remarkable political theatre I've ever witnessed. I was in the Commons when Geoffrey Howe made that resignation speech, which set in train the series of events that toppled Margaret Thatcher. And that was highly charged, remarkable because of what flowed from it. But in terms of sheer theatre, Cummings speaking for 7 hours and 7 minutes, raining allegations down on just about everybody who he's ever worked with in Number 10, was remarkable. And you've got to take a lot of what he says seriously, because it's the first time we've heard from somebody inside Number 10 in public willing to give what he would regard as an insider's view of what went wrong. Now, look, we can argue about the veracity of what he said, his motivation, but some of it had the ring of truth to it. We know that there was chaotic plans in place for PPE. We know that the Prime Minister took us late into the lockdown. What we didn't know was that he was willing at one point, if it's true, for Chris Whitty to inject him with some COVID virus so people could show it's no worse than the flu or swine flu. It's extraordinary. And then the extraordinary stuff from the Cabinet Secretary who said we could just have chickenpox parties. I mean, it was really, really peculiar what was going on in Number 10. Clearly, they weren't prepared for it. But then I would argue that was probably the same in a lot of governments around the world and Europe. But it makes for a pretty chilling picture of what was happening in Number 10 at the time, if, as I say, Cummings is telling the truth. And that's a big if.
Yes, political drama, no doubt about it, Kevin. But it was also a hard watch because you want to believe you have a fully functioning, competent government who has planned for the best outcomes and is watching the world to learn what they do. And it was laid bare tonight or today that that didn't exist in March last year.
No, well, beyond March, actually, it wasn't just then, Anna, and I think political satire was killed today. Dominic Cummings' account. Remember, he's only been out for about 6 months, and he and Boris Johnson were incredibly close. They were brothers in arms on Brexit. Cummings came up with the Get Brexit Done slogan for the 2019 election, was lauded by the Prime Minister. They have fallen out. But you just look there, there's the Daily Mail. Back the Tories at the last general election, wanted Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister. But any journalist, anyone objective, watching and listening to that would be absolutely horrified at what went on. And I think there was a ring of authenticity about much of it. If you'd have been reading the newspapers, you would have been aware of a lot of this, watching TV and radio, perhaps not the Express and newspapers, but all the other newspapers have been having a flavour and details of this all along. And then you get somebody who was there, which is why he has to be taken seriously. That's not to say everything he said may turn out to be accurate. Some of it will be his own interpretation. But it was just incredible. It just kept on coming. And often these events don't live up to the billing, but this exceeded it in far spades beyond that. And look, I remember the resignation speeches of Geoffrey Howe, was mentioned by Andrew, Norman Lamont, Robin Cook. They were all big moments. They were exceeded by this. I thought Rupert Murdoch's humbling at the Culture Committee some years ago was a big moment. That was far exceeded here. And it matters because, as The Guardian picked out, and I think the Eye picked out, he says tens of thousands of people died needlessly. That will be families mourning lost loved ones who didn't need to die. That is the most serious accusation you could level at any prime minister, any health secretary, any government at all. That is what it's about. That is why it matters, and it really just matters in spades. Johnson's got away with so much in the past. I wonder, it'd be rash to predict this, but I do wonder if this might be a turning point in his public standing, because he took such a battering, probably not as big a battering as Matt Hancock, the health secretary, when the cabinet secretary is said to have wanted to get shot of him. He says 15 to 20 reasons he should have been kicked out, and he was lying. Well, we know he lied about care homes, and he said a protective ring was thrown around care homes because they weren't. Patients were just charged from hospital who were infected, and they weren't tested, and they were put into care homes. But according to Cummings, Hancock had told the Prime Minister, before the Prime Minister himself went into hospital, that they would be tested, and then they won't be tested. And this is why, I suppose, Cummings accuses him of criminality and wouldn't rule out corporate manslaughter charges.
Yes, and we will have, or those committees will have their right of reply from Matt Hancock on the 10th of June. He will also appear, we're told, on Thursday, both in the Commons, an urgent Labour question, and at a press conference. So he's clearly coming out fighting. But what about the crucial questions about the Prime Minister, almost painted as an absent figure by Dominic Cummings today, Andrew? First of all, a non-believer, as you said from the start. You know, it's swine flu. Don't go to Cobra. He'll just tell people it's swine flu and not to worry about it. You know, absent and then on holiday in February, having delivered Brexit, which presumably was the great celebratory moment, and then ill and in hospital. I mean, not to mention later on in the year, with his thoughts on another lockdown.
Yeah, look, if it's true, it's and how will we ever know? We must remember there'll be an official inquiry next year, and it will be done in front of a judge, and it will be done on oath, and evidence will have to be provided. It was quite conspicuous that Cummings talked about, I do have WhatsApp messages, I do have text, but there was no documentary evidence whatsoever today. That's not to detract, however, from the fact that clearly in February, when the Prime Minister missed 5 Cobra meetings, there was a suggestion somewhere the other day he was writing a book about Shakespeare. I think that may have been disproved now, that idea. But what was he doing? Was he actually fixing his divorce from his wife, Marina? If the worry, I think, as well about this, Anna, clearly the SAGE committee of scientists were giving pretty poor advice, because if the Prime Minister thought this was no worse than swine flu, where was he getting his information from? The SAGE committee, they were very slow. They were apparently warning him a lockdown wasn't necessary. So what was going on with those SAGE scientists? The minutes of those meetings that we've rarely seen. In those early days and weeks, there was a real problem. We also know that Public Health England was a failing organisation, and it's being wound up and got rid of. But it seems that just about everybody, every organisation that should have been involved in this, if you believe Cummings, was not fit for purpose and was not delivering.
I know, but that's the really crucial question here, isn't it? How did they all not know, that is the allegation, when the public did? It was hard to buy loo roll at the start of March. I mean, the public knew what was coming. So it kind of beggars belief that all of those really super brainy people didn't actually work it out, Kevin.
Yeah, well, the public were watching TV news and seeing what was happening in Italy. They were reading the newspapers. They were aware. And they were ahead of the game. And Boris Johnson, he always likes to lead. Well, what does he do? He sees where a crowd is going, and then he runs to the front, pretends he's leading it. He was behind on this. And what was really quite alarming is he's even more slapdash and careless, and just treats events as a joke when they're really serious than we thought. And understand now, Anna, why he doesn't want a public inquiry to report before the next general election, because we got a flavour today of what would come out and what would be said. And I'm sure some of what Cummings said will be supported by others. You would have on oath the then cabinet secretary, Mark, said, well, he's going to have to account for chickenpox parties, but certainly on Hancock, if he wanted him gone, why did he want him to go? And it would be incredibly embarrassing for the Prime Minister and his cabinet and the Conservative Party if this all comes out in greater depth and more detail from more people before a general election. Because going back to the headlines in The Guardian and The Eye, this is about people dying, and tens of thousands of people dying needlessly is a credible charge to level against a Prime Minister and a Health Secretary and a government and a party. It does not get any more serious than this. Cummings himself isn't a very sympathetic character. There's a YouGov poll showing 55% of people don't trust the Prime Minister to tell the truth on COVID, but 75% didn't trust Dominic Cummings because of that Barnard Castle, County Durham journey, which he kind of changed his tune a bit on it today. But other stuff just had the ring of being true. I'd like to see detailed, long-term interviews with Hancock and Johnson where they are scrutinised. And you know, certainly the Prime Minister dodges those detailed interviews as much as he can. What he likes is a little clip for the news, a little comment, or one quote, and then off he goes. He gives the impression that he's very available to the public and he's engaging and he'll answer anything. But he doesn't do it in any detailed way. He flies by the seat of his pants which liar, pants on fire. He is in trouble, I think, with the public now on this. Well, it doesn't mean he's going to be gone, but I just think people will want him held to account, and they won't be given him the benefit of the doubt that he's enjoyed in the past in the same way.
Well, I'm not so sure that he is in big political trouble, actually, because this is one man's word. He's bitter and twisted. He was sacked from his job. He's bitterly resentful because he thinks Boris Johnson owes him everything. It was Cummings' clever campaigning that helped win the Brexit referendum against all the odds. It was Cummings who took him into that election in December 2019. And again, get the slogan, get Brexit done. It was Cummings who recognised that the Red Wall was vulnerable. Years and years of neglect, Labour as the establishment there. He thought that was a way to win the general election and win it big. So he feels bitterly betrayed and let down by Boris Johnson. And that will inevitably colour much of what he says. So, of course, a lot of what he says may be factual, but a lot of what he says may be exaggerated and designed, as the Telegraph puts on its front page, to wreak revenge. He wanted revenge, and by God, he got it.
Yes, and we'll certainly talk more about that as well. That very question on the front page of the Telegraph. Did Dominic Cummings only want revenge? If so, did he get it? That and more after this break. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me, Andrew Pearce, Kevin Maguire. So much to talk about. Let's return to Cummings on the front page of the Telegraph, which raises this question, Kevin, that this was all about revenge. We should mention, too, the idea of him as a credible witness. We've known he's never really liked the system or politicians. He's been famously rude about them in the past. Did he come across, do you think, as a control freak? He came back from being ill with COVID, and Hancock had dared to dictate policy in his absence and set targets for testing, and he didn't like it. I mean, will these politicians be saved because of the questions about his credibility as a witness?
Possibly, Anna, yes. Look, I'll go back to the 2016 Brexit campaign when he put that £350 million a week for the NHS lie down a bus. He said that was pivotal in winning the referendum, and it was an outright lie. He wasn't truthful about breaking the COVID rules in County Durham and Barnard Castle. No, I mean, the bloke is an egocentric. He's a bit mad, really, isn't he? It's all about him. He thought rules didn't apply to him. He could do whatever he wanted. But I think, as Keir Starmer said, the problem for the Prime Minister is he's got to decide whether he was lying, and if he's going to say Dominic Cummings was lying, then Boris Johnson's got to answer, well, why did you put him right at the heart of Downing Street for so long? And according to Cummings, he could just pop in and out of the Prime Minister's room. But you're quite right that the government will target him. And they will have good reason to some extent to target him. I'm somebody who's accused him of lying before. I'm not going to believe everything he says now. But yes, revenge may be part of it. But also, curiously, people sometimes are more honest when they're out of office and want to put the record straight and want their version of the truth. It may not be the full truth, but it's a version of the truth.